This is Newsday. I'm Annalise Nielsen. I'm joined here by Labor MP Julian Hill. He's been spearheading an inquiry into dowry abuse in Australia. It's a little known issue, but it came to light during the family violence inquiries earlier, or a few years ago now. Julian, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Can you tell me, how big is this issue of dowry abuse in Australia? A lot of people would never have heard of it.
Yeah, so I came across it a couple of years ago, soon after I was elected. I have a very multicultural electorate, and through community connections and constituent work, I became aware that there's a growing problem which most Australians would not be aware of regarding excessive demands for dowry. And dowry is not a custom or a culture which has been traditionally adopted in Australia, but with waves of new migration from certain parts of the world, we've seen a rise in not just exchanges of dowry, it's an old ancient custom, perhaps has a place in some societies, but dowry abuse, which the Victorian Royal Commission into Family Violence recognised as a key driver of family violence in many communities.
So how does it work? How does dowry abuse happen? Like, most people would just not understand the concept.
So at the worst end, the example I'd give would be most Australians wouldn't realise that marriage now has become a lucrative market. So if someone is an Australian citizen, they can return to their home country in certain parts of the world and effectively sell marriage and Australian citizenship for more than $100,000. So in the case of a bride, their family, often without resources, will gather together that money in gold, jewellery, cash and other gifts and send the woman to Australia in the hope of a better life. But the evidence shows that the demands don't end there, and demands continue to escalate. Women are often held here on temporary visas and are exceptionally vulnerable to family violence, and the groom will continue to demand more and more money, gold and gifts from the family.
So what have we learned from the inquiry? I know you've had a number of hearings about what the actual problem is, and how do you stop something like that, really?
So India outlawed dowry, for example, in 1961, and yet the practice continues, and it's a pernicious cultural practice that puts a price on women.
Because it's essentially a gift, isn't it?
Well, it's more than a gift. I mean, no one's talking about
but to regulate it.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. But dowry abuse is when excessive demands are made and the families are often involved in demanding dowries, and those demands continue. So it's more than just exchange of gift giving, which is part of every culture. So there's a growing sense, I think, from the inquiry and many submissions which say the Commonwealth at a national level should replicate the Victorian approach, which was recommended by the Royal Commission, change the Family Violence Act and make absolutely clear that dowry abuse is explicitly an economic form of family violence. Now that's important because it sends a cultural and an education signal, a normative signal, if you like, that you cannot put a price on women, that's not an acceptable part of Australian culture.
So where to from here if the last hearings are wrapping up, I believe, is it?
The last hearings we think will be this evening. It's a Senate inquiry, so I'm not actually a member of the committee, but I've driven the inquiry because of the work that I'd done and the speeches that I'd made on it. The report will come out early next year. I'd hope for some strong recommendations, and then if the government doesn't respond, then Labor will be in a position to consider those recommendations.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what you were making of the politics of the day. It was pretty extraordinary seeing Malcolm Turnbull come out on radio today and have so many things to say about his former colleagues. Well,
look, in one sense, I don't think Labor members need to talk about the government today. They're doing that more than well enough themselves. But if you sort of reflect on last week, on Monday they lost Wentworth, Tuesday they lost Chisholm, Wednesday, Thursday were good days for the government. They didn't lose a member. But honestly, you wouldn't think they could have a worse week, more self-obsessed week than last week. But the news this morning was just extraordinary. They're divided, they're chaotic. The thing that I suppose strikes me, and it's a genuine point, I wouldn't say it's likely, but it's becoming more probable that we are witnessing that once every few generations implosion of a major political party. You cannot overstate enough just how much these guys now hate each other.
There's a lot that still the government wants to get done. Encryption laws is one of them. We understand that Labor and the government have come back to the table to discuss that. What do you see as the big sticking point in the encryption law debate?
Look, I'll just make a very general comment. It has been something I think that served Australia well, that there's been a bipartisan tradition in national security of the Intelligence and Security Committee sensibly, carefully examining national security legislation and coming to a bipartisan agreement on that. I was really disturbed by the reports over the weekend and even this morning that the government was walking away from that. But I'll leave it to members of the committee to actually work through the detail and make comment if and when they reach an agreement.
I don't know if you heard Angus Taylor's comments. Energy Minister on Sky News earlier today was saying that Labor's holding them hostage over these national security concerns. Do you think that's fair?
I thought the comments were absurd, and actually I was delighted to see that some of the commentators talking to him then and after called that out. I mean, to say that serious members of Parliament are protecting terrorists or friends of terrorists and friends of pedophiles is offensive and nonsensical, and I don't think it serves the government's case well at all, because people will see through that as hyperbole.
Oh, well, Julian Hill, Labor MP, thank you so much for joining us. I'll let you get back to the House, and we'll have to get an update from you when the inquiry results come out.